when we talk about AI, it's the hot buzzword right now. Everybody's talking about it. If you go back a decade ago and everybody was talking about big data, everybody's talking about it. Nobody really knows what the ins and outs or what the true possibilities are about it, but everybody says that they do. I mean, it amazes me how many experts are out there right now, of AI experts and this, that, and the other. I'm like, how are you an expert? I was like, we really even know the true depth of what this can do. And so I'm just excited just to have conversations. And I tell people all the time, whenever I'm giving having these conversations and giving these talks, it's just getting people to realize, don't put AI in a box. Like, we don't
Right.
even know what it can do. We're so much of just scratching the surface on this. We don't know what the true pros are, nor the true cons. And so I think that's kind of where we're at, which makes it fun and exciting and terrifying all at the same time. It's like being on, a roller coaster in the dark where you can't see the end. You're just going all around and ups and downs. And so it's fun for those that are thrill seekers, and it's terrifying for those that like to see where we're going, because we don't know where we're going yet.
Yeah, that's actually a really awesome segue into a couple of things that I have here. I want to kind of read several things out real quick because you mentioned things like terrifying, pros and cons, could be scary. We don't really know yet. So just a couple of headlines these are first couple of headlines I typed in when I typed in things like Internet of Things, AI, and security concerns, just as a Google search. U.S. public concerns grow over the role of AI in daily life. Deepfake concerns growing along the AI technology. Trends in AI ethics before and after ChatGPT. Why the Pentagon's killer robots are spurring major concerns. Uber Eats now shares video of LAPD privacy concerns rise. Why IoT raises concerns about identity theft. Cybersecurity no longer a one-size-fits-all in an IoT world. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when I read all of those is absolute terror. They're all skewed in a very negative sentiment. But that's not the majority of the way AI is being utilized today, especially when we mention things like ChatGPT. I know, for instance, I've had a couple of people who've talked to me about, I used ChatGPT to kind of write me something, a synopsis of a thing I wanted to write out, and it was quick for me, and then I could make edits to make it my own afterwards, because it's not perfect, it's automated generated, and it wasn't in my voice, so I had to make sure it sounded like me. Things of that nature. So just in general, overall, when we hear these headlines, and these are all headlines within the last year, really dig into where we come from on that, bring us back around from a less negative sentiment.
Yeah, I think those concerns are real, because like I said, we're scratching the tip of the surface of this thing. We don't know what the pros and cons are all the way around. But when we start talking about chat GPT, and just we'll use that as an example because that's the big name in the room right now. There's it amazes me how so many people don't even realize the depth and breadth of AI that's out there. Like, there's over 1,000 different AI applications, those that are specific to cybersecurity, those that are specific to HR, those that are specific to finances. I mean, there's all kinds of different AI tools that are out there. Last week, I was giving a talk, and I was in a room full of, I think there was like 150, 200 people in there. And I asked people,
Mm-hmm.
raise their hand if you're using AI, and people start raising their hand. I was like, all right, let's name some of them. And the most that they were able to name was eight. Eight of them was the most that they were able to name. And so when we start talking about, so let's drill it back down to ChatGPT. I tell people just to use it. I think ChatGPT is great from the perspective of, you no longer have to start from a blank piece of paper and try to figure
Mm-hmm.
out and create from scratch. I think ChatGPT is phenomenal of giving you a starting point. It definitely helps people like me, because I consider myself, I tell people, I was like, I'm an enhancer. I was like, if you give me something, I can figure out ways to make it better, and I can figure out all the ways in which it'll break. I was like, I'm an enhancer. I was like, if you gave me a blank canvas and said, create whatever you want to create, oh my God, I get terrified. Like, I don't even know where to start. I have no idea. Like, I could never be an interior designer. People that walk into houses be like, oh my God, do you see the vision? I'm like, no, I see blank
No.
holes in walls, and I see dirt and chaos. I was like, I see nothing here. They're like, oh, you could do this, that, and the other. I was like, well, once it's there, then I can envision it and I can see it. Then I can enhance from there. And that's the way that I operate. And so for me, ChatGPT is a phenomenal tool. And I
Mm-hmm.
was telling people last week, I was like, look, I was like, the way I use ChatGPT, I was like, I encourage you all to get out and play with it. I was like, I even go to ChatGPT before I go to Google just so I can see what it comes back with. And here's a prime example. So the shirts that I wear, this one is I do it for the 22. I do a lot of work to support veterans, and I do it for the 22 is to and signifies the 22 veterans that commit suicide every day. How do we help bring that number down? So I'm on a big mission for that. But I wear the shirts, and I have people come back and they're like, "Hey, we would love to buy one of those shirts. Where can we buy them?" I was like, well, I just had them made it for me because it was just branding and everything else like that. But now that people are asking for them, I was like, all right, I never really thought about doing an online store. But before I went to Google, because I know if I go and Google it, I'm gonna get a boatload of results, and then I have to weed through and read them. So I went to ChatGPT. I said, hey, give me an outline on what I should do if I want to start selling custom made shirts online. And boom, 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 boom. It gave me step by step. It gave me websites to reference. It was much easier and faster for me to go through that to get that information than it was for me to Google it. And so I've found myself starting there in certain instances, just to, if nothing else, help me to narrow down my search terms. Because if you don't punch in the right search terms, you don't know what you're going to get, and you can be analysis paralysis and digging through things all day. And so, I encourage people to start using it that way. If you're not using AI, one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I tell people all the time, I was like, AI is not going anywhere. If you think it's
Right.
bad now, it's only going to get worse because it's going to continue to get better. The information, what it's able to bring and read on is going to get better. I was like, so if you're not using it now and getting comfortable with it, you're going to be so far behind the curve whenever it all settles out in the end.
It's a very interesting take that you have on how you're taking real concerns people have with it and saying, why don't you just try it out? You won't know until you try it. So I have two kind of like follow-on questions. One, I want to kind of have you elaborate on those that are just diehard, won't touch it because it's security concern issue, it's ethically an issue, it's whatever their excuse is for not using it, and it might be just they just don't want to. That's fine too. I've used it myself, and it helped me out with a lot of like mapping for course materials that I want to do, like write me a course map in the concept of blah blah blah. It's at least a starting point, and I think that's a really great tool for that. So first question, focusing around those are diehards that have the actual like ethical, security, whatever concerns. How do you bring them around other than saying just use it, and say like understand your security concern, but like maybe you can relate it to something else that's happened previously, and well, we didn't really have cyber 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That wasn't a thing. Cyber was not a thing, right? So how would you bring that around to addressing their concerns, being understanding, but then also trying to bring them into the fold?
I think for those that are on the fence or on the side of, yeah, I'm not going to use it, I always go back to the point of one. Are there some security concerns? Absolutely. We're in the process of sailing the ship while we're building it because we don't
Mm-hmm.
know if I put information in there, who has ownership of that? Is it OpenAI has ownership of whatever was created? Is ChatGPT its own entity and the program itself because it's AI has ownership of it, or do I have ownership of whatever the output was because I'm the one who prompted it with the appropriate questions? Is the ownership belong to those who created the database in which it's pulling all this information from? Like, we don't know. I'm curious to see what things look like over the course of the next 5 years as we start to have these more detailed ethical and moral conversations around AI. But at the end of the day, this is what I go back and tell these guys. I was like, it's not going anywhere. Like the cork has been taken off the bottle and the genie's out. You can't put it back in. Like it's not going anywhere. And so if you're not getting comfortable with it, if nothing else, try it. Don't put sensitive information in there, obviously, because it's all open source. Everybody has access to those things. And so don't put sensitive information in there, but start playing with it just in micro bits so you can actually see what it does so that you're not ignorant to what its capabilities are. And you might find some use cases where it's like, oh, this makes sense for me. I'm not going to lean on ChatGPT to write me a legal documentation. I'm just not. But there was an attorney who's getting ready to lose his license because of that.
I did read that. I read that whole news article, and I was like, "Why would you do this?" They made up like it was illegal and fake references basically for the entire case to get it dropped, and he's gonna lose his license now.
To kind of focus in or kind of highlight how fast we're moving with this thing, I mean, ChatGPT in the first iteration of it, if you look at it now at the bottom, it tells you, hey, all the information that ChatGPT produces may not be accurate. And they had to
Hmm.
put it in there because of stuff like this. And I tell
Right.
people, I was like, look, I was like, it's become so common that the industry's coined a term for it. They say it hallucinates because it wants to produce something for you. It's designed to produce something and give you something, and it wants to please you so much to the point that it will fabricate and hallucinate and make things up. And so, if you're using it for statistical data, fact check that stuff. Don't take it for word
Absolutely.
or for gospel just because it was in Chat GPT, because it's not always accurate. But once again, going back to what I said before, it gets you started with something. It takes you out of the, hey, I've got a blank piece of paper and I've got to figure out where I'm
Right.
going to start, where I'm going to go. Hey, it'll give you a framework. Like I said, I'm not using it step by step for everything that I'm doing if I decide to sell t-shirts or sweatshirts or whatnot. But it gave me a great reference point to where now I have an idea of, hey, these are the steps, these are the processes that I need to kind of go through and think about if I want to start doing this work and getting into this. Whereas before, I would have spent hours researching things on Google, reading through different articles, taking notes, coming up with my own ideation and figuring all this stuff out. Whereas I threw it in Chat GPT and it gave me a pretty good synopsis in a matter of seconds. And that's what I would highly encourage people. Just start playing with it from that perspective. If you really want to enter in on a low barrier to entry, throw into Chat GPT, hey, I've got these ingredients in my pantry. Create a meal out of this and let it create you some recipes and just start
Hmm.
there so you can actually see the full capabilities of it. But I would say start somewhere, because sticking your head in the sand and trying to avoid it is a big mistake because it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, we've actually seen in the cybersecurity community where that did not end up well for people before or in the past, where a new technology or something comes around, and they're like, "Oh no, that doesn't exist. It's not real," and we're like, "It's very real. You need to do something about it." I do agree with you on that. A couple of things I got from that as you were talking is ChatGPT is a people pleaser, much like some of us in this world. It wants to give you answers, it wants to help you out, it wants to do good for you, and I kind of think that I relate to that as a human, which is very odd to be able to relate to something that is automating your life from like a human aspect or a human perspective. There's more than just ChatGPT, but everyone seems to be hot button topicked on it. It kind of feels like it's replacing Google in some aspects. I'm not going to say that it ever will replace Google. Those are not my words, but it feels very much like I'm getting a better outcome. I do have to still sift through it and read through it and make sure that it's not, false or fictional in any kind of way. Like it didn't pull a legal term from a folklore galaxy that doesn't actually exist, and make sure it's not applying it to the human world. Lose licenses over it, things of that nature. So I do think that it's a little more helpful and maybe even better than a Google, just because it will pull that data for you and it wants to give you something in return, and it may even give you something a little more to your specifications, because a lot of people don't know the traditional Google dorking style techniques where you look for specific things using different types of documents and what have you. So that might be actually helpful for the general population. Just fact check it. I think that's a very important thing. Don't put sensitive information in there. I think those are all very important things that you really, really hit on for everyone else. I kind of want to broaden out from ChatGPT because it's not the only AI out of here. It's a great big old thing we love to use, but it's not the only AI. So talk to me about some other types of AI and automation and things that you've been seeing in the past, I don't know, year or two, just kind of popping up. And talk to me about how they are bettering our lives and we probably don't even realize it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to I think one of the things that people need to understand is that AI is not new. AI has been around for quite some time. I mean, think
Mhm.
facial recognition software, that's AI driven. License plate scanners, those have been around forever. That's AI technology. The difference is where we're at now is we're at this new inflection point where it's generating stuff. Before, AI was just analyzing data and then spitting out, hey, you give me this big database of information, and then boom, 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 well, AI will analyze it and then give you a summary, or give you an output. Now we can prompt it. It's this whole new generative piece is where things are changing. And so, I paint that just to let people know, hey, AI has been around a long time. So there's a lot of things that AI has already been doing to impact our lives on the back end. In the cybersecurity space, being able to analyze things and the amount of data in real time is impossible for a human being to do. And so AI is a great tool from that perspective, AI and machine learning, to be able to analyze big data sets and then to be able to identify anomalies and things of that nature, to help businesses stay protected and be more proactive rather than reactive when it comes to cybersecurity. And so I think there's a lot of application for AI all across the board. Airlines have been using AI for quite some time to help with air traffic controlling and things of that nature. I mean, so we use more AI in our day-to-day lives than what I think we realize. And so it's this whole new generative piece where I think it's changing, where like I said, there's so many different AI applications. You've got video AI, you've got voice AI, which is a very, very slippery slope for me. The technology is the technology. It's all in how I intend to use it and the way in which I deploy it. So with that being said, I think voice AI and video AI, super cool when it comes to being able to create marketing content at scale. I think it's phenomenal. To be able to record a snippet of my voice, and then now I can type something out, and now I don't have to sit in front of a camera, record it, and I can run it through these programs and it generates it. Super cool. I think that's pretty awesome. Now, on the flip side of that, super terrifying, because anybody can grab those snippets and enough of a snippet to copy your and modulate your voice and video image, and now they can get behind a keyboard, type it out, and now it's you. So essentially they've cloned you, and that's a challenge. So now how do we discern what's good, what's accurate, what was valid, and what was made up by somebody else? That's a challenging and slippery slope that I think we're going to find ourselves having to figure out very, very quickly.
That's the deep fake concept. Yeah, it's terrifying a lot of people, and I think a lot of the ones that come out or that have been created about public figures. And I mean public figures, I'm talking presidents of different countries and senators, UN ambassadors, things of that nature, where people are cloning voices because they speak from conferences, they speak publicly. You get their voices, almost any video, you can type them in to a YouTube video, find their voice, clone it, and then of course clone their likeness as well, because they're usually also videoed while they're speaking. And then it terrifies people because like, oh, well, AI is bad because it's just going to make us think that people are doing things they're not really doing and it's fake. It's all in how your intent is to use it. Some of those original intents to use it was just to show people this is a thing that can happen. Also, let's reiterate, not everything on the internet is true or real. I don't know why we have to keep telling people that, but we do. We have to keep reiterating that not everything on the internet is true or real. And I think that AI is advancing that concept a little bit more. But again, we go back to it's all in the intent and how you're using all of the different types of AI.
There was something that came out a couple of weeks ago where somebody had copied Tom Hanks, his likeness and his voice, and was using it to promote a product. So now, what do we do when we've got celebrity figures that have been cloned and they're promoting a product, but it's not really them promoting a
Not
product?
really
How do
them.
we as
Yeah.
consumers know? And then the other example I want to share is that this was last week. It might have been 2 weeks ago as well. My son sent me a video, and he was like, "Hey, he's like, did you know that Eminem and Drake were beefing?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He sends me this video of this rap battle between Eminem and Drake. I was like, "What?" And I started looking at it, and then I started doing some research. 100% AI driven. The rap lyrics were
Wow.
generated through Chat GPT for both Drake and Eminem, and then they were both fed through an AI synthesizer to modulate the voice. But if you didn't do any research, you would have thought for sure that these guys were spitting hard. I mean, it was good. I listened to it. I was like, wow, that is nice, and it was all 100% fake.
It even sounded like them.
It sounded just like them.
Like Eminem was freestyling that. Oh, that's awesome. That's actually really cool.
It was super cool. But it's like, okay, so what happens now when if I
Right.
have once again with the Tom Hanks example, if I've got a
Mm-hmm.
product and I modulate it, and I rip somebody's likeness and throw videos out there like they're promoting my product and I make sales,
Right.
I mean, obviously I have to be legally liable for that, but how do you prove that? Like, what's the process for all that? So I think, like I said, we're on very, very slippery slopes here,
Right.
that we don't know what it's going to look like yet.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting to bring that concept up because that was one of the concerns that they had just recently with the strike with the Writers Guild and with the actors who joined them afterwards. I know that they came to some kind of temporary deal for a while, but I know that was a very real concern. They were concerned with AI taking their jobs for writing scripts because you can just send something a prompt and you get information back, it generates it back. And now also with Tom Hanks's likeness being used, you're using an actor in his likeness, but it's not him. Do you really need him on screen anymore? Is the next question I'm assuming that they're going to ask. And that is a very real concern for people who make lots of money acting and doing these jobs and putting that's their career. So I can understand the concern with all of that. It's interesting, and also it would be very interesting to hear the. I'm gonna have to go look up the fake rap battle just for my own fun. AI has been around for a while. We're just now starting to see, though, the move from just kind of data analysis into generation and creation, which leads me to think that machine learning and data science are basically becoming AI. Do you think that that will transition all machine learning and data science into AI, or are we still going to end up having separate departments for those things?
I think there's going to be a convergence at some point, just because the data that we're able to process. I mean, you got to
Mm-hmm.
think for the past decade, 2 decades, it's been the era of big data, and
Right.
companies have been amassing massive amounts of data, not knowing what to do with it. And now
Mm-hmm.
that they've got it, and we can deploy AI technology against it to make faster, smarter decisions. I think the machine learning piece just goes hand in hand, and we're
Right.
already seeing it in the cyberspace. Let's be honest, AI will so you can use AI to monitor things and look for anomalies within behavior patterns based upon a set data set. But then you can also roll that into a SOAR platform, machine learning, where, okay, once you identify this trigger, then based upon what we already know, these are the automated steps that you can go ahead and execute. And we're already doing that right now when it comes to
Right.
cybersecurity. I mean, the big companies and organizations have those capabilities already in place, and they're already using it in their SOAR platforms and everything else. And so that direct connection, we're already starting to see that. So I think it's going to be more of a convergence as things continue to progress. I don't see how it doesn't.
I go back and forth on it really on where I see some of that, staying certain types of way, or because we've really seen this different type of change in the way we handle some things with cybersecurity as well, and it's been really hard for us to keep certain jobs and things separate from like, oh, you're just network engineering. No, you actually do a little bit of cybersecurity too. It's kind of hard for us to keep those from happening. So I kind of teeter back and forth on whether or not they'll kind of come together or they'll have like this line and they kind of blur across it, but they still stay their own separate jobs or conditions with that.
Hit the nail on the head there. Is that I think the day of the hard line, like here's the line of demarcation, I think those
Mm-hmm.
days are over. I think it's going to be so much of a
Right.
blended area and so
Mm-hmm.
fluid. And in some areas, it's going to make sense where the line doesn't exist at all. In other
Right.
areas, there's going to be a semi line there, and there's going to be some fluidness there. And I think, to me, at the same time, that's the beauty of technology, is that
Oh yeah.
I tell people all the time, I was like, take your thinking out of the box. I was like, because I promise you, if there's a will, there's a way.
DMV and like driver's plate recognitions and licenses and things of that nature. TSA probably uses it to recognize your new real ID when you're going through to get recognized for boarding a plane. So are people's concerns regarding their identities and privacy to this nature valid? And I mean by concerns, I mean their concerns with potential identity theft and privacy issues and concerns with AI when it comes to things like this, because we've already mentioned we know, even though we know that those systems that they're using are locked, encrypted behind some other place and location, not the regular public. ChatGPT doesn't reach in and go find your driver's license. But do you think that the general public's concerns regarding identity theft or privacy issues with AI is a valid concern?
That's a very good question, Jordan. And I think I'm kind of on the fence on it. And the reason why I'm on the fence is that I truly believe that everybody's information is out there, so much out there, that is your identity truly secure? Like, I just got notification. Actually, no, it was my brother got notification that uh, an insurance company a big insurance company had suffered a massive data breach, and it said some of your stuff has been exposed, and look on page 2 for a list of the things that have been exposed. And you flip over to page 2, it's literally everything: your name, your birthday, your address, your email address, your phone number, and your medical history. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me that my entire identity was stolen? Because anything that I need that's needed to steal my identity was released in that whole process. And so, those are the things that I look at. It's like, okay, how do we protect those things, or should we be worried about protecting those things? Because
Right.
there's these data warehouses out there where all that information exists. And so it's like, okay, what do we do, and how do we protect it? And is it, so from an AI perspective, I think the information is already out there. So that's my biggest. I guess that's where my concern, or at least where I'm like, is it a concern? It's yes, it is, because you can find it faster, but at the same time, all that stuff's already out there. So now it's
Mhm.
just a matter of monitoring for yourself to make sure that if there's a change within your personal information, that you become aware of it as quickly as possible, so that you can start to remediate and minimize the damage. And I think that's where we're heading to when it comes to cybersecurity. It's rapid detection, rapid response, because being able to stop every possible vulnerability and every possible attack vector is virtually impossible.
Surprises me every time that somebody brings it up or we talk about it. How many people just aren't, they don't pay attention to what's been potentially released, what databases have potentially been released or hacked or anything like that, where their data has been gone with that information, or like they don't know why. Like, oh, my credit card has a $200 charge on it that I didn't charge. Like, how did that happen? Like, that's the example. That is that somebody took your credit card information. That is probably linked to the identity theft, because nobody just like randomly grabs a credit card. It's probably linked to your address, your phone number, and your name that they got from some other database where you made a purchase that was then hacked, that was then released to the public.
Jordan, I would say the reason, one, it doesn't surprise me because people are inherently oblivious to things, because they don't pay attention. It's not real until it happens to them or happens to somebody that's in their sphere of influence. Like, yeah, I
Right.
hear about it, but that's not a problem that I have. And
Right.
it's the same reason why, here it is, we're in 2023, and we're still having to tell people, hey, don't reuse your passwords. Hey, use different
Right. That's
login
a good
credentials
point.
for different things, because they still do it. It's just like, okay, well, how many data breaches do you have to witness and see and hear about before you realize, hey, I should probably use different passwords and different logins for different places? Like, I shouldn't have my Amazon login credentials shouldn't be the same as my bank credentials. But how many people still do it?
All the time. Yes, I mean, I guess you have a good point there. I should not be surprised, but I guess it's because I'm always in this state of, every month or so, I'll check my stuff on have I been pawned. Same for breaches from like way back in the day that don't mean anything to me now.
If there's ever going to be a concern with AI, it comes down to name, image, and likeness. That's where it's
Yeah.
going to be an issue.
Okay.
Identity is already, I think everybody's identity has already been exposed in some various form or level, that it's
Hmm.
prudent to make sure that you're on top of it, to make sure that if there's any changes, that you become aware of it as soon as possible. But that deep fake that we kind of touched on earlier, I think that's where AI changes the game. And
Right.
where I'm concerned is for like elderly people, like, mom, you're not elderly, but I'm using you as an example. They've
I'm
already
telling your
proven
mom.
that they can clone phone numbers. So we already
Right.
know they can clone phone numbers and make calls look like and originate that they came from my phone. So if somebody were to get my phone number, call my mom, so now it looks like it came from AJ's cell phone, and I do enough videos and I've got enough content out there that you can clone my stuff. If you were to call my mom and say, hey, mom, I'm in trouble, my mom's not going to think twice. She sees the
Hmm.
number, it registers as AJ's
Right.
phone number. It sounds
Right.
like him. What does he
Mm.
need? And she's going to go ahead and execute whatever request has been made. And that's where I think it gets very scary, because I don't think that we're too far away from that right now.
The deep fakes being the only one that's really like that big. We're going to probably see that one be a big security concern, for people being taken advantage of and things of that nature. So, do you think that it's under more scrutiny than any other thing we've seen in automated or other technologies?
I do, but the reason behind it, I think, is just because I think it's just natural. When you
Mm-hmm.
go back and we think about just how much technology has advanced, prior to the internet, It wasn't a massive explosion and adoption. Now we're in the information age and the fast-paced age where everything is at our fingertips. So
Mm-hmm.
everything gets hyper scrutinized. Why? Because it's at our fingertips immediately. So everybody has access to it. Everybody has an opinion and everybody has a platform where they can voice that opinion. So you go
Right.
back 10, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so I think everything is super magnified now only because the platforms are that much bigger to where everybody has a voice. And so we get massive scrutinization and massive different polarizing viewpoints on things because everybody's looking at it all at the same time and it's all right there. But if you take back the massive exposure, I think it's getting the same level of scrutiny and pessimistic views and optimistic views that you do with every technology that changes and progresses. When Amazon first came out, they were selling books online and everybody was like, who's going to buy books online? That's dumb.
Everybody.
Exactly. Netflix back in the day, and now we all stream stuff. Like even my
Absolutely.
parents are streaming stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that curve we all go through, and I don't think it's any different now with AI. I think the interesting part for me when it comes to AI versus all other technology advancements is
Mm-hmm.
how fast I think everybody's pushing for governmental regulation, which I think is very interesting to me because I do not know how you regulate this. Like, I'm very curious to see what this looks like over the course of the next 5 years, because like I said, the cork's been taken off the bottle and the genie's out. How do you put it back in and how do you put guide rails on something like this? I don't know.
It's going to be so hard for us to figure out how to regulate that because I'm kind of along the lines with you. I don't know that we do have a solid concept or grasp on how regulating or governing the use of automated generated content creation. I, I just don't know. I don't think that we have a good answer.
And I've seen there's a couple of different cases that are going on right now. And I was talking to a guy last week and he was saying he gave me two cases and I haven't had a chance to look into them yet. He said one was based around somebody who was utilizing one of the graphic generating tools. It might have been Midjourney or it could have been Dali. I can't remember, but they utilized that AI image graphic generator to create a comic book, and they wrote the copy for the comic book. Well, it turns out they couldn't they're saying that they can't copyright the comic book because they didn't create those images themselves. And so without being able to copyright the images, then you don't have anything that you can protect, and therefore your comic book is open source and you've got nothing to protect there. Very interesting to me.
It is very
Where
interesting.
and then at the same time there was another case that was over in Australia that he was telling me where the government in Australia says that the AI entity itself, since it created that it has ownership in the product that was produced. And so to me, once again, we're just not we're building this ship as we're sailing it and we're trying to set parameters around this. And I just don't know where it's going to ultimately land because there's so many different arguments that can be made. And once again, with all the different ways it can be used, how do you restrict it? Now you're going to have to go to open AI and these manufacturers and these developers to have them put restraints on something and build them in. Like I just don't understand. I don't see. I get the concerns of, hey, we need to be able to control this and there should be some guidelines here. But now that it's out in the wild and in the open, in the wild, wild west, I don't see how you bring it back in yet. So I'm very curious to watch it and see. I mean, even with these lawsuits and these cases setting precedents on things, how do you stop me as an individual from utilizing the tool in the way in which I choose to utilize the tool in the privacy of my own home? Does now ISPs get involved where they're scanning and blocking different things based on keyword sensitive? I mean, once again, now invasion of privacy, where does that line? I mean, there's so many different gray areas that are leading to
Absolutely.
this that I just don't see how you govern it.
I think this has been a really, really great discussion on AI, kind of eye opening a little bit. I think it's probably going to have a lot of back and forth issues in the comments section, which I am very excited about. I would rather hear people talk about it than not. When I
Let's
see,
have
do you have it?
dialogue.
Yes, absolutely. Let's have a conversation about it. So Before we do close out with anything else, I want to see, do you have any other remaining thoughts on the topic? Just anything in general that you'd like for people to keep in the back of their mind when they hear the word AI?
No, I think we covered it here. I mean, if there was anything if there was a parting shot that I was going to give, it would be to play with it. Don't put it in a box. Don't look at it as this evil thing. Technology is technology. It's all in your intent and how you plan to use it. But start
Right.
playing with it and get familiar with it because it's going to change everything. It's going to change the way in which we teach our kids because now, you know, technology's at our fingertips. I don't need to memorize all the presidents in the United States. I can just ask Google or ask Siri, and it's all there. And so the same thing with writing papers. You know, does it make sense for us to tell people not to use these tools that are there to make things easier for them? Is this a skill set that they now have to have moving forward, or is
Mm-hmm.
it a detriment to them? We don't know yet, but I would say get out there and play with it and try it because the one thing I can promise you, the one thing I can say with absolute certainty is that it's not going away. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be erased. And so get used to it because we're only going to see more and more applications of AI moving forward. And so if you're not playing with it, at least being cognizant that it's there and how it's impacting and changing things, that's whenever you find yourself in trouble as a person, identity theft and people you not realizing that it happened. And as a business, Blockbuster thinking that streaming wasn't going to become a big thing. And now Blockbuster's no longer. So that's how we get in trouble is by putting our head in the sand. So I would just say, don't put your head in the sand. Figure out what's going on, start playing with it a little bit, and start using it to whatever level you're comfortable with, but start using it.